There's a really nice book by, what's it called? Somebody Brown, anyway, called Human Universals. And in it, he takes on a kind of cultural relativism, really, that developed in the early part of the 20th century within anthropology. And kind of tries to formulate a provisional list of those aspects of human being, which, not those things which distinguish us, might be the hugely different cultural practices that we engage in, but those things which are, as the title of the book implies, are human universals, which crop up in all societies everywhere, which isn't to say that every member of those societies either engage in these practices or hold these beliefs, but that they figure within all those societies. So it's things like names for low numbers, names for certain colours, incest prohibitions, the existence of rape, which is slightly one of the more disturbing ones, along with prohibitions against rape, which is slightly more encouraging. And there's a whole list, there's about 400 I think in this book, and they've been picked up elsewhere. I know Steven Pinker talks about them in one of his books, The Blank Slate, I think, and elsewhere. And one of the things that's interesting in there is the prevalence in all societies of some kind of religious practice or spiritual practice, the existence of spirits or something like that. And again, that's featured in a lot of anthropological writing. This idea that there isn't a society anywhere on the planet that doesn't have the concept of religiosity within its tenets. I'm going to back up here because actually I can go to the field instead. I can see a dog coming. And it seems to be the case also historically that there doesn't seem to have been a society discovered that doesn't have some sort of evidence of practices which we would now think of as religious, either grave goods, which suggest the presence of an afterlife, or some kind of ritualistic practice which suggests an invocation of some spirits or something like that. So what Brown argues there, or Brown points to us really, and what other people argue elsewhere, is that spiritual practice, metaphysical practice, religious practice is a human universal and an integral part of all societies everywhere. Now, on the one hand, I find that a little bit sort of daunting, because as an atheist, I have no interest in, well, I have a lot of interest in the gods, but I don't have any belief in those things. But at the same time, so it is a bit daunting, but at the same time, I also find it really encouraging, peculiarly encouraging, actually. Because what it sort of says to me is that, no matter where you go in the world, no matter how far back in time you go to the beginnings of human existence, there have always been people, the majority of people in fact, who've asked really, really big, really, really hard questions. Where did I come from? Where am I going? Is there a meaning to life? Where did the universe come from? What happens after you die? What is the right thing to do under certain circumstances? All those really big questions that religions of all types kind of operate in the presence of, even if they don't fully answer them. So, I've seen this in action. I spent a few days in a community a few years ago, which was a community of mostly quite profoundly mentally handicapped adults. And the amount of religiosity amongst them was astonishing, really. They weren't. It wasn't a religious community, so they hadn't been indoctrinated into any particular religion. But they were hugely interested in the big questions. Hugely interested. I think it's also really it's also encouraging in a slightly less palatable way, perhaps. That certainly in the statistics in the States, I don't know the statistics for the UK, but certainly the statistics in the States show that religiosity seems to be most prevalent. Conventional religiosity, fundamentalist Christianity, for example, seems to be most prevalent in those areas of the state which are not associated with high educational attainment or with high standards of living. In fact, the opposite correlation seems to be the case, which on the one hand is slightly depressing, but at the same time there's this sense that, no matter how far down the social scale you go, to the most deprived individuals, living under the worst social conditions and having the least educational opportunities, these people still don't want to just sit in their trailer parks and watch quiz shows. I guess we all want to do that sometimes, but they want to address the big questions and engage with those big questions. So I think there's something, terribly encouraging about that whole project, that we as humans seem to want to go there in a way that marks us out, possibly, I suppose, is particularly human. Of course, being atheistic, I'm inclined to assume those questions are at least partially answered by the open source religion of science, if I can call it that. Well, I might be wrong. I might well be wrong. And I look forward to being proved wrong at some point. We'll see. Yeah.